Right. Hello and welcome to Autistically Wired, a conversation series that highlights autistic people as professionals, careers, and tr- entrepreneurs and community contributors. I'm Brooke, an interviewer for today's conversation. I'm late diagnosed ADHD, an entrepreneur, and an education professional. And it's really meaningful for me to be a part of these conversations and help create space for autistic voices to be heard and valued. This series centers what becomes possible when autistic people are supported in being our full authentic selves rather than focusing on deficits or barriers. These conversations are strengths based, flexible, and guided by each guest's communication style, pacing, and preferences. Today, I'm really glad to be joined by Tamra. Tamra, so thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to start by inviting you to introduce yourself and whatever feels right for you. So you could share
Absolutely.
about your work or your journey or anything else.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Tamra, also late self-diagnosed ADHD, but that has been so meaningful for me to explore and understand about myself and reflect on what that has meant for my life, uh, how it was prior to some big life changes and how that affects me now. Um, the I guess it's just so I don't know if you want me to start about the move stuff or you just want to move right into questions. It's kind of I kind of address most of those things like throughout the course of what I prepped for answering the questions. Oh, you're still muted.
We can absolutely start with questions.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
so can you tell me about your journey to discovering your ADHD, so that is autistic and ADHD identity, and what that realization changed for you and how you see yourself and life?
So after discovering my ADHD identity, I now notice just how much I was trying to hide who I was from nearly everyone in my life. I have said before to people in different situations that my main goal in life is to just go unnoticed and not stand out and just do what I'm told. I just stay on the straight and narrow. Um, but even though I say that, that's my kind of in my head, that's what I tell myself to do. I've always somehow ended up in situations where I ended up in some kind of leadership role. So I was like, great, this is not what I wanted, but here we are. Uh, and so part of this also comes from I thought because of my training as a music therapist, I thought I knew what autism was because in certain fields you take courses and learn about different diagnoses and different people you might encounter or work with or try to be helping. And so you think you know what that is, and then you go through life and learn lots of different things actually outside of education and quickly realize a lot of that is not accurate anymore. It's based on incorrect studies with middle class, young white male people, and that doesn't have anything to do with women at all. And so, in my mind, I never crossed my mind until the last couple of years that that was even a possibility. Um, and so just everything just being outdated and all these things. I mean, my partner is diagnosed with ADD when he was 8 years old, as a lot of young white boys are. And so he's been able to speak about what that's been like for him as a struggle, and being on medication, different things, and how he felt and how he was treated, having that label from being quite young. But once I learned more about really what autism really is and how that can look different, so much different for women, so many different puzzle pieces just clicked into place for me. um, and one day the light bulb just went on and I thought, oh my goodness, I am autistic and here we are, and what do I do with this now? Because I thought I don't even know what to do with this information. It was just kind of a shock to the system because of my education, my training, and the jobs that I had previously, and the things that I had been kind of focused on to teach as a part of the time I was a professor as well, and the things I was trying to teach students, I thought, this isn't right anymore. Um, so it, sorry, I'm just going to find where was my notes. um, so when I then worked up the courage to tell my partner that I was ADHD, he also was immediately like, what is that? What do you mean? I just thought, you're very organized, you're very clear, you know what you want, you're good, everything is just the way it's supposed to be, and you're so successful in all these things, like how could you possibly have any struggles? And it's like, well, obviously there's this thing called masking, and I got really, really good at it from a really young age, and so you wouldn't have necessarily noticed that I was struggling with so many different things over time. And so then I started to try to take a really hard look at what does my life look like when I stop masking, and what part, and I'm probably going to be going through that for a long time, figuring out what parts of myself are me and what parts of myself I had to force myself to actually be. And so I think I've definitely obviously made some progress with that, but it's still, I think, going to take me a while to figure out um, that long term. Uh, I've also, it's also come out in some interesting ways where I was recently doing a theatrical production with a local group. And my partner said, you never did much acting when you were growing up. And I said, I think I realized that's because I was acting my whole life trying to be normal. And so I didn't have the energy to pretend on stage at that point. And so now that I feel like I don't have to act as much day to day, I have energy to act in other ways, which sounds a bit silly, but it just in my head was so much like I was pretending my whole life. I was acting my whole life how I was told I had to be. And so I never, even though I loved theater, I loved musicals and all those things, I never did much actually on stage. And I found it really difficult. And I think that's why. Um, do, do, do. Um, I think one of the most challenging things still is when it comes to conversation, or I disclose to someone that I'm ADHD, you get the response, well, you don't look autistic or you don't act autistic. And you're like, so that's really not a thing. And it's like, well, how much education do I do right now? What do you actually say to that? What do you not say to that? Who is it I'm talking to? Is it worth discussing further or not? Or, find a way to just kind of like, haha, brush that off and move along. But it's just so, it's one of those things that some people just, I think, say without thinking about it. And they don't realize the impact it actually has on someone, devaluing their lived experience. And so I really do try to, in certain situations, if there's something like I don't quite understand myself, to not make that my go-to response, because I know what that's like, but also to try to help people understand that maybe things that they know, they don't actually know. When it comes to things like this, it's like, oh, you're too successful, you have multiple degrees, and you all these things. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean I don't have challenges. That doesn't mean, it's the whole idea that what, like, you can never fully understand what someone is going through from what you see on the outside. And I think once you've had experiences where you've lived that, that makes so much more sense to someone. So I do really feel very fortunate, though, with where I am now, that I've found a really amazing group of women who we're all pretty sure we're on the neurodivergent spectrum. That we are so, it's just such an amazing group of women, so supportive, non-judgmental. It's the whole idea, like calls to like, you find your people, and being able to be with people like that, where you feel like you don't have to pretend at all who you are or watch what you say. We just understand each other on a different kind of level. And I feel so fortunate to have found that community as well.
And is that there in Scotland with you? where it's local
Yeah,
or okay.
yeah, local to where I live now, which has just been amazing. So some of the moms of um, uh, kids in the same grade as my daughter, and just generally in the community who've kind of known each other, and we've just somehow ended up in this group of friends through a book club, and it's just been, I mean, it's fabulous. I mean, we meet tomorrow, and I'm so excited. Like now you just
It
like look
is so nice when you have those in-person groups or people because there is a lot of community online and ways to connect with people online, but it's different when you have them in your life and you're existing and doing your day-to-day activities like taking care of your children, going to book clubs or school, work, having people who understand that you are autistic, have ADHD, and you don't have to explain yourself. There is this level of, okay, I can let my guard down because I'm not going to be perceived incorrectly or over explain.
absolutely. It's really been such a breath of fresh air. And there, I mean, we also have a, WhatsApp group chat on the book club, and the things, what was that, a couple weeks ago, someone was sharing like my car is a mess. I was like, it's like a biohazard, and everybody's like sharing how crazy their cars are, and it's like, this car is a representation of the inside of my brain. And it's you just like, we all were like 100%, I totally get that. Yeah, just things that would seem silly to other people. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to show how messy my house is," and we're like, "We don't care. This is just what it
Yeah,
is." And that just, I mean, it just tears down so many of those barriers.
absolutely. I really liked what you said about getting into theater while it was an interest of yours in the past, but you didn't pursue it because now you have that energy to be able to mask professionally. That would be professionally, right? Because you're on stage.
Yeah.
In a different way than masking in your work as a professor and a music therapist, and even as a student, the masking that we have to do in order to look a certain way to our teachers or our professors.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's just something that clicked in my head when he mentioned that. And he said, "You just never did that much in high school or what, or back then." I said, "No," and I just don't think I could have. I don't think I would have been able to pretend in real life and pretend on stage at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, so I ended up being involved in theater, but it was all off stage. It was doing costumes and makeup and still being creative, but not having to put myself out there in that kind of way.
And do you ever struggle with that fear of being perceived? Do you think that maybe was part of the reason too, why it was harder to put yourself in extra role, like how you mentioned that you found yourself being put in leadership roles, even though it made you uncomfortable? Was it more challenging because it was masking and having to manage yourself and also manage other people? Or could you go into your thought process on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think I always have had a worry about people perceiving me in certain ways, which is why I got so adept at masking and presenting the way that people thought I should be.
Yeah.
And but when it came to the leadership roles I ended up finding myself in, um, either in different things in high school or at college, and after, it was in areas also that were what you, I guess, would consider special interests. And so it was easier, I think, for me to be in a leadership role in something that I was so interested in that I didn't have to second guess myself because I felt more comfortable that I knew enough of what I was doing that I could take it on, even though, and make sure whatever it was getting done. But I didn't have to, let's see, but I didn't have to worry about like not exactly faking it, but not knowing or not feeling like I didn't know enough about what I was supposed to be leading. I felt like I knew more than enough about what I was supposed to be doing. I knew what the expectations were. They were clear. I was interested in it. So I said, fine. It wouldn't have been my first choice to do this or lead this thing, but if I have to, it's fine, because I felt like I knew enough. There wasn't as much imposter syndrome as there would have been in other things.
And sometimes I feel like that happens with me as well when it feels less high stakes when it's a special
Yes.
interest and something that you're pursuing on the side versus something that is focused on your well-being. And you had mentioned being high achieving too, where um, I don't want to uh, like it, usually high achieving goes hand in hand with people pleaser. I don't know if you identify with that. I
Yeah,
don't want to put that to assume that's where I was going with that.
sure.
But that can be a hard thing when you are in a career and you're high achieving. You want to perform well, you want to be able to support yourself. And so there is more pressure to do really well than if you're doing something on the side. Like when I've done my little side hosting gigs or
Mm-hmm.
I've done astrology readings, although that was kind of stressful too. But anyways, that transitions me into my second question. You're ready for that one? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
As someone who describes themselves as a high achiever, what did meltdowns or overwhelm look for you? Were there relationships, supports, or strategies, perhaps during your time in higher education or your career, that helped you care for yourself?
Yeah. So as a self-described high achiever, uh, for me, meltdowns looked like myself like turning more inward. And so it wasn't very outwardly visible uh, to people around me. It was definitely turning more inward and becoming like more disconnected, or somewhat dissociative from things around me. Uh, I mean, part of that I think comes from that I was always told to like keep my feelings on the inside and not burden other people with things or bring attention to myself. And so instead of being able to do probably more physically express a meltdown or things overwhelm, I had to find other ways to still have my body regulate itself. But that turned into things more like, um, so when I got overstimulated, definitely got very quiet. I had a hard time focusing more. Um, had certain stimming things like nail biting, hair twirling, like kind of like scratching, like picking skin, or like go to kind of like chew on my lip, or like the leg bouncing. Those little things that weren't disruptive for other people, but they were things that my body needed to do something, because it couldn't be a big outward reaction or response, because in the past, having those kinds of things taught me that that was not safe. And so those were the safe kind of things that my body could still do. Um, if the overwhelm or the overstimulation got bad enough or was long term enough, then eventually would have more of a external kind of breakdown, and generally not in a public space, but still in a private space, like very sobbing, inconsolable, couldn't even talk about what was happening. I couldn't verbalize, didn't really understand like how to explain what was happening. And just got to that point where my body needed to actually physically release in a bigger way. Um, and then, kind of that got out, and then it was like, okay, we're good, move on. And didn't even like really ever verbally process any of that either. But eventually that's kind of what it would get itself up to. Um, a lot of times I think that also had to do with I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to about these types of things a lot. I think that has to go along with the masking as well. That I felt like I have this like long ingrained fear of people like not understanding me, or if they saw these undesirable things, that they wouldn't stick around. Um, and so, or when they realized that I wasn't the perfect high achieving person that I pretended to be, so I tried to hide these I thought at the time defective parts of myself, for as long as I could. So especially just growing up until before going to college. I mean, in college I definitely met some amazing people that I felt like I could be more myself around. And I think part of that had to do with being spaced away from where you grew up, and having just generally the expectations of just growing up and fitting into your family. And so when you have space away from that, I think that helped me, start that transition of knowing myself better, um, and having people that I didn't have to be as careful around because they didn't have any past knowing of who I was or who I thought I was supposed to be. So that helped as well. Um, as far as um, when I would get overstimulated as well, things that I would often find myself doing to kind of like take care of myself, uh, especially in college and after. I always remember often going, or just I needed to feel like I needed to decompress. I would just go and do things with music, specifically play piano or things. It was music that was for myself, though. It wasn't had to do anything with classes, anything with studies, but it was music that just I enjoyed, that I liked, that was music for me. I also really enjoy getting a good massage. Uh, so obviously not just helps, not only with physical tension, but I think we know that too, like sometimes addressing some of that physical tension also helps with emotional release as well, in different kinds of way. I've also found different types of movement helpful. I used to be quite into running, not so much anymore because my hips really don't like that. Um, well, my hips, my knees. I used to also do quite a bit of Highland dance, just other general dance classes. So that physical output gave another release for my body, to be able to stay more regulated. Um, I think um, there's still that balance of working to take care of myself, because it's just been a habit for such a long time to put the needs of other people before myself. And so I'm trying to shift that to be more, at least equal, if not trying to prioritize myself as much as I can, in that whole understanding of what people always say, you can't, you know, the plane and the oxygen mask, that you have to put it on yourself before you can help somebody else, because you're not going to be any good to anybody else if you pass out first. So trying to really be more mindful of the things that I need to do to take care of myself. Um, and I think that was is more manageable now that I moved to Scotland for a lot of reasons that we'll get into. But when I was living in the US, with the way things are going with all the things of life in general, it was unmanageable and it was too much. And I felt like I had no space or capacity to make time for myself at all. Or if I did, I felt really bad for having to do it, because why couldn't I just do it? Why couldn't I just fix it? Why couldn't I just get over it? And that's obviously not how things work, even though I just thought they should have. So I'm better about it, now that I can recognize easier now as well when I'm getting, even somewhat close to that point of overwhelm or overstimulated. Just recognize more in my body and more intentional and more focused on these little signs and signals that say, take a minute, you need to stop, you need to do something for yourself. Um, and so I'm just trying to keep listening to myself, when those things come up, and not ignore them, and let them get too far.
That's all really good and helpful advice for younger people too, because I think it's a very relatable experience to have to mask and hide your stimming, hide when you're uncomfortable. And so sometimes it does manifest as, um, like you said, the nail biting and skin picking. So then your hands are red and bloody and or the internal battles that people can have. So it's good that even before you knew that you were autistic, you had your outlets of movement and music where you could be, well, with some things by yourself, but then with dance, you would be with other people. And so it sounds like even before your diagnosis, you were doing things to understand yourself and self-soothe. And I am happy that you shared like all of those specifics because they're so relatable and it'll be helpful for other people to see that in themselves. Okay, so you mentioned moving to Scotland and how that has helped with some of the overwhelm too. How did that move affect your sense of identity, your routines, or your well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the recent move to Scotland, so we moved in 2022. Uh, some of the stuff I mentioned earlier too, a huge, massive impact on obviously the discovery that I was ADHD. Um, I think I don't know if and when I would have come to that understanding of myself if I had still been in the States. Being here just has given me so much more mental space for a lot of things. So we're able to move to Scotland because I have British citizenship because my mother was born in Scotland. And so, unbeknownst to me, until about 9 years ago, I could have applied for a British passport from when I was born, apparently. But so because I have citizenship here, um, I'm able to move here, work here, whatever, without any restrictions. And so knowing that I was a citizen, my family was able to come over on a family visa instead of having to do a skilled worker visa, which is much more difficult to obtain and much more difficult to maintain long term because work can be such a uh, can just be really not consistent all the time, or if companies change their minds or other things. And so to move your family across the ocean for specifically on the basis that a job is going to keep you employed for a certain length of time to keep your visa was really never an option. So knowing that they could come on a family visa instead, which also carried no restrictions for my partner to be able to work while we were here, made that move possible. And I'm extremely well aware of how privileged we are to be able to do that because I know a lot of people um in all different places who don't have options like that to be able to make such a big transition um and are stuck in some really difficult and challenging situations. So I'm very aware of how much privilege I have to be able to do that, because I know how obviously we're talking about today, how helpful that has been for me in so many different areas. So definitely moving here gave me so much more space to really, like literally and figuratively, from a lot of situations, space to discover like who I am, especially when I don't feel like I have certain roles that I have to or expectations that I have to play at work or with people who've known me my whole life or with people who are just think they know who I am or what I'm about. And so it was just like a starting over in a lot of different ways. Um, and, even things like it just was not sustainable long term for the life that we had set up in the US. And that's partly also because I think from my idea of what I had to do in life and was just set out for you and this is what you do and this is the next step and this is the thing. You go to college, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids, and then the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And figuring out at some point it's like, that doesn't work for us. That we did all those things, but still something's not working. And I mean, I can't say for certain too that my marriage would have survived a long-term stay in the US longer than we did. It's just one of those things we don't know for sure, because of the way that things were. But being here has also strengthened our relationship tenfold. It's just amazing how many things have changed for the better being here. And I'm not speaking out of turn. My partner and I have talked about that a lot. This won't be a shock if he listens to this. That we've said that before. Just like the work and hustle culture, was just like slowly taking me down. I couldn't really verbalize how or why. It was just that something, it didn't align. It didn't feel right. It was just, we couldn't imagine figuring out how to change what we had while we were there. We were just too stuck in the systems that were in place there. And so being able to move really allowed us to have the space to do so many things. I mean, life definitely here also moves at much slower pace, I have to say, which is a great thing for general mental health and overall well-being. Absolutely. The idea that you could meet people here and sometimes, not for how many umpteenth times you have a conversation with them, not necessarily know even what their job is. If you don't meet them at work, it's your job's not your identity. I mean, things like we have universal health care, our towns are walkable. We get nearly most jobs standard have 28 days of paid time off during the year, among some other bank holidays or other just general holiday vacation days that come up. I mean, I can have our daughter go to school and I'm not worried about active shooter drills. We feel so much safer, which is like a whole load off my mind to begin with. We were fortunate that we moved here right as she was going right into school. And so that transition worked really well, that she never had to experience that before we moved. Because if I know her, which I do, because she's like me for better or worse, she would not have been able to focus at school, having had to think about any of that or worry about that, because she is sadly a little worrier, like I was. But so she's thriving in school. She's doing so well, and she's so happy. And some of these things I just couldn't imagine having to deal with if we weren't here. To an extent, I mean, there is still a sense of feeling like outsiders that we're working through. We've been here in a couple months, been here for 4 years. We do live in a fairly small town. It's only 6,000 people, which is smaller than even the place we moved from. And a lot of people that grow up here, a lot of people that are here grew up here or are not far from the area here. So they definitely have a lot of roots. We don't. We're obviously American, even though I have citizenship, but we don't sound like we're from here. There's that kind of, you stand out a bit. But I mean, obviously we're learning, to find our people and lean into that sense of community. And I've been so fortunate to find that, especially with this fabulous group of women. But I mean, just having the headspace to also be really present for each other, and for our daughter. I mean, I work 28 hours a week. My partner works 24 hours a week. We each only work 4 days during the week. So like today's my day off during the week, and we also have weekends off. He has a different day off during the week, but we're able to live on the money we get from that, and then some, have more just space and time. I mean, we also choose to live in a 1-bedroom apartment, where our daughter has the bedroom proper and our room is the main living space, but we also have an attic that's functional. But that's a far cry from the 4-bedroom house we moved out of when we came to move here. But you realize when you make changes like this, like, you don't need as much as you think you do. You can do so much with so much less, and getting out of spaces and away from people that are constantly telling you need more and you need this and this is the thing you have to do, and really deciding for yourself what makes the most sense. I think we do sometimes have to stop ourselves from falling back into old habits with thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had 2 bedrooms, or wouldn't it be nice if we did this or someone did that. And it's like, that's not what we need. That's just our brains having been used to saying, you have to do the next thing, you have to do the next thing, you have to achieve this, you have to keep moving forward. And you realize that sometimes it's okay to stay in one place for more of a long period of time. And so here it feels like we can just be whatever we are. And I cannot tell you what a gift that has been for all of us. Um, it's just it's just been such a blessing, truly.
It definitely helps to be in a shift of culture like that when it doesn't feel like you're living in survival mode and it changes your mental health, but also, your interpersonal relationships because you're not struggling so hard to keep up with all of the input also from needing to maintain life and then work and status quo. So having that adjustment and making a living adjustment that works for you and your family is really important in reassessing all of that stuff. So it's good to hear that moving to Scotland has helped you so much and helped your relationship and helped your child thrive. That's wonderful news to hear.